boy. Good morning. My name is Lorenda Ward. I'm a senior investigator in charge for the National Transportation Safety Board. I have 23 years of experience at the agency. I'm also joined by Clint Crookshanks and Van McKinney, who also have 20 years of experience at the agency. The NTSB is an independent federal agency charged by Congress to investigate every civil aviation accident that occurs within the United States. We are multimodal. We investigate rail, pipeline, hazardous materials, marine, and highway, in addition to the airplane accidents. We are transparent. We will be collecting factual information during the investigation, and that factual information will be put into group chairman reports. These will be put into our public docket, which will be released to the public. We do use a party system. We invite those who have technical expertise to participate in our investigations, and that is typically the operator, the regulator, the manufacturer, and any unions that might be associated with that event. For our accident, we do have Roads Aviation, the Federal Aviation Administration, Boeing, Pratt & Whitney, and the National Air Traffic Controllers Association that are parties to our investigation. Our mission is to improve transportation safety by recommending changes to address safety issues that we uncover during the course of our investigation. Just to give you a brief overview, Roads Aviation Inc. was doing business as TransAir Flight 810, which is a Boeing 737-200 that was bound for Honolulu, Hawaii on July 2nd. It was ditched shortly after takeoff from the Honolulu International Airport, soon after the flight crew had reported anomalies in both engines. The two pilots were able to escape through the cockpit windows, and they were rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard and the Honolulu Airport Aircraft Rescue Firefighting Unit, which we're having the press conference at. We're now in the third phase of the investigation. The first phase was the initial launch and our arrival here on scene. We located the wreckage. We conducted our initial interviews. We reviewed the maintenance records, and we also collected air traffic control data. For the second phase, we conducted a second set of interviews, and now we're back to recover the wreckage and to document it. There are 3 investigators in Hawaii right now who will be here throughout this phase. 2 will go on board to go onto the recovery vessel, and they'll be working in 12-hour shifts, and then myself will stay ashore. There are 2 main vessels that are involved in the recovery. It's the Eclipse Group's Bold Horizon, which is a research ship, and Curtin's Maritime Corporation's Salte Verde, which is a barge. Both of the vessels have sailed from California, with the Bold Horizon arriving tonight, and then the Salte Verde should be here around the 15th. Curtin's tug, the Shirley C, is bringing the barge to Hawaii. TransAir's insurance company has contracted with the Eclipse Group for the lifting of the wreckage and bringing it back to shore. They've also contracted with Penco to provide environmental cleanup if it's needed. And then American Marine Corporation is going to be moving the wreckage from the ship to a temporary storage location. Lone Star Retrieval is responsible for moving the wreckage to a permanent storage location. There are over 40 people who are supporting this effort on shore and at sea. Eclipse Group will have a marine field ecologist who will be on board to monitor any protected species encounters. This is the false killer whale, the Hawaiian monk seal, and any sea turtles that might be encountered. We have been working closely with state and federal agencies, with the State of Hawaii Department of Health, the Department of Aquatics Resources, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA. We've also been working with the U.S. Coast Guard and the Hawaii Department of Transportation. And this is to ensure that we minimize our impact to the coral reef and to the sea life during our recovery operation. We anticipate that we're going to recover all the major components of the airplane from the ocean shelf. That shelf is about 350 to 450 feet deep. Our debris field is pretty linear, and it covers an area of about a quarter mile in length. We will cover the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, and the recorders are important. The flight data recorder, or the FDR, will provide us with important information about the performance of the airplane, and the cockpit voice recorder or the CVR gives us potential insight into the challenges the crew were encountering and how they may have handled those challenges. We are establishing a safety zone around the recovery area. We have worked with both the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, and they have put a temporary flight restriction in the area. And we also have worked with the U.S. Coast Guard, who has made a limited access area. And this is to protect our folks who are working on board ship, and then also for the flights who may be arriving, because we will have a very large crane that will be working in that area. Bold Horizon will be using dynamic positioning to stay on station, and the barge will be using anchors. On board the Bold Horizon, there will be a primary ROV, which is a remote operating vehicle, and that will be doing the bulk of the work with a backup ROV if needed. Can you grab my bag? Ah! The ROV weighs 7,000 pounds and is actually taller than I am. It has an umbilical that will be providing its power and real-time video stream to the ROV operator, and it can utilize multiple tooling attachments. Since there are no drivers, no divers for this operation due to the depth, the ROV will be our workhorse, and it will be rigging the pieces of wreckage to prepare it for its vertical lift for recovery. The engines will be lifted by the Bold Horizon and then put back onto the Bold Horizon. And we're estimating that the largest piece of the engine will weigh about 3,000 pounds. Both the cockpit and the aft fuselage will be lifted by the barge's crane and then put onto the barge. What is unique about this recovery is that we essentially have two pieces of the airplane. When the airplane was landed on the water, it essentially broke into two very large pieces. So instead of a fragmented airplane, we're going to be lifting two pieces, with the heaviest being about 97,000 pounds. The majority of the water recovery wreckages that I have brought to the surface before usually have been fragmented, and we have much smaller pieces to work with. There are a few variables in play, but we expect to have our team on board the Bold Horizon on Monday. The sea state could affect the pace of their recovery. We have to get the right combination of wind, waves, and swell before the wreckage can be lifted. If you take a day like today, we would not be lifting anything on board the ships. Depending on the weather and the sea state conditions, once the recovery operations begin, we expect to have the engines on shore within a few days, and then the rest of the wreckage within a week. Once all the wreckage is ashore, it will roughly take a week to document the recovered airplane. The wreckage will be photo documented when it's on the ships, but a detailed documentation will occur once we bring it on shore, because the boats will be going like this, and when we put it on shore, you're going to have a stable environment to document. The recorders will be transported to our lab in Washington, D.C., where they'll be cleaned, dried, and downloaded. The fuselage pieces will stay in Hawaii. The engines will be documented, crated, and then returned back to the Bold Horizon, where it will sail back to the mainland for their teardown. Once we complete this phase, there's still more to do. We take a comprehensive look at the structures, engines, systems, maintenance, survival factors, vehicle performance, air traffic control, oversight, the response, and the human factors. This can take anywhere from 12 to 24 months to complete. If we find any urgent safety issues during the investigation, we can issue those safety recommendations ahead of the final report. That final report will have the probable cause, any contributing factors, and any safety recommendations that may come about as a result of this investigation. This concludes my briefing, and I can take a few questions. Thank you. So the question was, is it normally this long for it to take 3 months to start the recovery process? Once the aircraft was located, it was in a depth that is not for the traditional divers to go down to. So the insurance company had to do a request for a quote that had to go out. We gave the folks 30 days to be able to respond. Those proposals had to be reviewed, and then the contract had to be awarded, and then the ships had to be outfitted and then sailed to Hawaii. So that is a longer process, but that had to do with the depth and the location of the wreckage.
Can you talk to me about the environmental impact? At this point, do you know if there's been any environmental impact in the area that it's now sitting?
So the question has to do, is there any environmental impact currently? So when we did a survey of the debris field, we did video survey of that, and we shared it with the state and federal agencies, and they were able to review that video. They did not see any marine life that was in the area, and it looks like the way that it's sitting on the shelf, it has not done any damage. What we're going to be monitoring while we are doing the recovery is the placement of the anchors to make sure that we don't damage the coral. And then once again, if we do encounter any protected species, we will document that. And we'll stop operations if we do see animals are interested in what we're doing.
I know you mentioned that TransAir is working with their insurance company. So are they covering all of the costs for the recovery of the aircraft?
The question has to do with who is covering the cost of the recovery. TransAir's insurance company is covering the cost for the recovery of the wreckage. The only tax dollars that will be used for the recovery would be to pay our salaries.
You said the plane cut in half. Is that extra weight going to pose a challenge for you guys? Because you were saying that usually, it's in multiple parts that the weight is less. Is this going to pose any unique challenges for you?
So the question was, since the plane only broke into 2 pieces, is that going to cause any unique challenges? That's an excellent question, because it will, because now we have a lot heavier pieces to bring up, and then associated with that is you have surface area that can be impacted by the wind. Like if it was a day like today, you might have a helicoptering of the wreckage as it's being lifted. So that's it. It's something that we definitely have to take into consideration, is the size of the piece and how heavy it is.
At this point, do you have any idea what may have caused the crash?
The question was, do we have any idea what may have caused the crash? Right now we're in the fact gathering phase. Once we finish the fact gathering, we'll switch into the analytical side, and then that's when we'll go into determine the probable cause and contributing factors.
How old is this aircraft? How long has it been in service?
I'm sorry, I heard how old is the aircraft? And
How long has it been in service?
so this is an older airplane. It has been in TransAir's fleet since they started their Part 121 operations. All right.
Do you have any updates on the 2 pilots? Do you know what their condition is, how they are?
The question is if we have any updates on the 2 flight crew members. The flight crew members were released from the hospitals, I think, within 72 hours. We did interview them when we were here in the on-scene phase. From what I understand, they are at home, and TransAir, they're waiting to come back to fly.
Can you describe exactly what you're looking for regarding what will help you determine the cause of the crash? I know you mentioned the flight data recorder. Is there anything else?
I'm sorry, because of the wind, I couldn't hear you. Can you repeat it? The question was, what are we looking for during the recovery? So what we're going to do with the wreckage once it comes aboard is we'll be documenting the aircraft fuselage in and of itself. We'll look at the systems. We're going to be looking at the engines. We also will document the cockpit, see what position the switches are in. We will also look at the crew seats and look at the restraints to make sure the restraints perform like they were supposed to. And then we'll bring the engines back to get them torn down. Last question? So in the grand scheme of things, how massive is this recovery? I did mention that we have over 40 people that will be supporting this, both on the boats and then on shore. We have had larger water recoveries. If you look at the TWA accident investigation, if you look at Swissair 111, which we were accredited representatives to, if you look at the ValueJet, Alaska Airlines, Egypt Air, we had a much larger response that was needed because once again we had smaller pieces and a more fragmented aircraft. Thank you.